Hello students, welcome to Legacy Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a new development which is of significant nature coming from the Russia-Ukraine theatre, where after 2 hours of long call between President Putin of Russia and President Trump of United States of America, it seems that both countries are inching toward peace accord, or at least trying to make progress in the direction of ceasefire and peace accord. So let us try to understand this in more detail. Now, yesterday it is reported that President of USA Donald Trump and the President of Russia Vladimir Putin has talked extensively for almost 2 hour period, and as a result of this discussion, when a press conference was arranged, the Russian president have stated that according to this phone conversation, or as per this phone conversation, both of countries have agreed to work with Ukraine on a memorandum that will deal with a peace accord as such. Now, Putin, while expressing gratitude, Trump credited the US president for the resumption of direct talks between Moscow and Kiev. Now, it should not be surprising, because even before taking the charge as 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump has clearly stated that one of his goal or his presidency's objective would be to bring Russia and Ukraine toward a ceasefire, toward a peace agreement. As you know that Russia attacked Ukraine in the early days of year 2022, and almost 3 years have passed, even more than 3 years we can say as of now has passed, and both countries have suffered extensive economic losses. Russia has gobbled up a large part of Ukrainian territory and has captured today, and overall what you can say, the war has entered into what strategic experts call it as a stalemate. Stalemate refers to that situation where none of the countries are able to make progress along the front line. The front line becomes kind of static in nature, or it moves at such a snail pace, such a slow rate, that no country is able to achieve any kind of progress in the claim or control over the territory as such. It is in this regard we have to understand that the ceasefire like talk have begun. After the phone call with Trump on Monday, Putin said that efforts were generally on the right track as such. Now, if we try to understand about this particular development, it has come following the Russia-Ukraine meet that took place in Turkey. We have seen that from the early days of war, there has been 2 territories or 2 countries that have made a step toward ensuring peace or trying to make progress toward peace between countries. One was Turkey, that is considered as a neutral territory, because again Turkey's President Erdogan is received warmly by both Ukraine as well as Russia as such. And it is very interesting, because if you try to understand, Turkey is a country that has taken S-400 air defense system from the Russia while being a member of NATO as such. So that shows you how credible his position is as far as the Russia-Ukraine talk is concerned as such. So that is the development that has happened. However, there was also a kind of what you can call as disappointment, because it was believed that in the Istanbul where the peace talks were held, it would be a meeting between the Russian President Putin and the Ukrainian President Zelensky, but both leaders were not able to meet as such. And Trump, in that later on, he has stated because he did not go to Turkey, to Istanbul, that is why Putin did not come. And this tells you how significant US role is in the entire peacemaking progress as such. Now, we talk about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. It has released a statement following the phone call between the 2 presidents, that President of Russia statement, if talk about, has said that Russia supports a peaceful settlement of the Ukraine crisis. Now, it is very interesting, Russia has never used the term war in case of Ukraine. It has even made it unlawful, and anyone in the Russia, if he uses term war related to Ukraine, he or she can be penalized and even put in the prison as such. So that is why the term you are seeing is Ukraine crisis, Ukraine conflict is largely what Russians have used. We need to identify the most effective ways toward achieving peace as such. This has been the statement coming from the press as such. Now, if we talk about the Kremlin, Kremlin is basically President's office of Russia, we can say, because it is not in the office of President. Kremlin is also the resident of the Russian President. So, Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov has said that the Putin and Trump did not discuss in a specific timeline. Obviously, there is a discussion that both countries should try to create a stable situation where the talks about ceasefire can progress. Earlier, European Union and US both have said Russia that they should basically agree to a 30-day ceasefire without any conditional, we can say unconditional ceasefire, but that was obviously not accepted by Russian President Putin. So Putin and Trump did not discuss in a specific timeline. Even after this telephonic conversation, it is no guarantee that after certain days, for a certain period of time, you will see a ceasefire between both countries as such. But the 2 leaders discussed a possible prisoner swap, and we know that Russia has arrested a lot of American citizens even during and before the war, and similarly on the charges of espionage, many Russian people and Russian citizens have been detained in the United States as such. So both countries have agreed that they will trade 9 Russian prisoners in exchange of 9 American prisoners. The Kremlin added that Trump called the prospect for ties between Moscow and Washington impressive in nature, and similar kind of statement you see is being given by Donald Trump himself. We know that Donald Trump posts on Truth Social, which is a social media platform he migrated to when Twitter banned him in the first term of his presidency. So he has said that just completed my 2-hour call with President Putin. Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire and, more importantly, an end to the war. Now we know that Donald Trump is a fan of posting on social media platform as soon as he finds it suitable. We know that in the case of India, Pakistan war also, when the Operation Sindoor was in its full, what you can call as the full assault mode was on in the Operation Sindoor, it was Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump who first has posted on Truth Social that India and Pakistan have agreed to ceasefire. Now this is before both India and Pakistan have acknowledged any kind of ceasefire like talk. So similar kind of statement we see in the case of Russia-Ukraine war also, and there you will see a kind of dissonance here, because what Trump is saying that both countries have agreed to start negotiation toward a ceasefire immediately. Now this is not true, because Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs have clearly stated there is no timeline as such that when ceasefire talk will start and when it will conclude as such. The conditions for that will be negotiated between the two parties, as it can only be because they know details of negotiation that nobody else would aware of. Now this statement is a very important statement, because earlier when Donald Trump began to insert himself in the Russia-Ukraine peace talk, it seemed that he is bypassing the European Union or the European Union leadership as a whole. He is bypassing even the Ukrainian government as such, and it largely seemed that there is a kind of deal going on between the US and Russia as such. So this is something that he is trying to basically now do what you can call as firefighting, and that is where he has stated that Ukraine is responsible and Russia is responsible. These are the two countries only responsible who will agree that what kind of deal they want. US would not be a main party there, and nobody else would have aware of it. The tone and the spirit of conversations were excellent. That is what Putin has said, and that is exactly what Donald Trump also has said. And last, after talking about this, that he also, now again see what I told you, that many times a concern was raised by the European Union leadership that they are being bypassed, they are being neglected in the peace talk, and this is very significant because talk about the Ukrainian territory, it is a part of European landmass, and any change in the what you can call as the peace settlement process or any change related to the geopolitics of this region significantly impact the European region, because US is far away, it is beyond the Atlantic Ocean. So that is why now Donald Trump also is trying to bring all the European Union leaders also as a part of the peace process, and that is why he has stated that he has informed about this to all the names of the leaders you can see from here from major countries of Europe as such. And last he has stated in his what you can call as a special kind of this statement that he gave, like let the process begin, similar on the line of what we can call as the Hunger Games begin, is a very famous line from a movie called as the Hunger Games as such. Now if you talk about the memorandum where both countries Russia and Ukraine would try to come up with an understanding, the Russia and Ukraine will have to define a possible ceasefire and a time frame for the same as such. Ukraine, what Putin is saying that Ukraine, its European allies and Trump-led United States. Now see, the wording is very important here, because as long as Joe Biden was the president, it seemed that there is no possibility of any direct communication and contact between Russia and US, because he even went on in the early days of war, Joe Biden talking about, and he even had said as closely as possible that Russian President Putin should not be leader of Russia anymore, he is a dictator. So the relation between Russia and US has showered to what you can call as a great degree during the Biden's presidency, but after coming of Trump, we are seeing again attempt being made to establish some kind of formal talks between both countries as such. So all urged Putin to agree to a 30-day unconditional and immediate ceasefire deal and pause the over 3-year-long hostilities in the region. Now while referring to the press, Putin has clearly stated that Russia's position is very clear. First is the main thing for Russia is to eliminate the root cause of the crisis, and second, again I told you that Russia never has used the term war, it has used the term crisis or conflict. We just need to determine the most effective ways to move towards peace as such. Now Putin, we talk about again that what was the logic and reason given by Putin that why he has started the war, why he is trying to annex territory of Ukraine. So he has said that it is because of the continuous enlargement of NATO. But again, if we try to understand the irony here, it is after the attack on Ukraine. Two other countries have joined NATO. These are Sweden and Finland. Now again, you can see this is older map. So these countries, if you talk about this is new map, so you can see the green countries here are basically the NATO members. So earlier Sweden and Finland, these countries were not member of NATO. They have followed a long-standing policy of neutrality between the Western blocs and the Eastern blocs. Eastern bloc earlier was led by Soviet Union, and obviously its successor state Russia as such later. So you can see this is the Russia in the orange, and then you have the NATO as such. And then here you can see in between you have two countries, Belarus and Ukraine. Now they can be considered as a buffer zone. Now Belarus obviously practically today is completely under the control of Russian President Putin, because the dictator of Belarus, that is Alexander Lukashenko, his regime was saved by the Russian interference when a large scale protest began to grow in the Belarus in the year 2020 and 2021 as such. And then the only country left here is Ukraine. So what Russia is saying that if NATO expands and in what you can call as Ukraine become the member of NATO, which was a talk in the early days of Zelensky's presidency, that means NATO will come directly on the forefront of Russia as such. So Soviet Union fell in 1991, and after that NATO has continuously enlarged, and US-led alliance is encroaching on what Putin considered Moscow's sphere of influence. Now see, sphere of influence is a term that generally is used with reference to a great powers, big powers such as US in the early days, UK when it used to be a big power as such, and Soviet Union, and also during World War II, Germany, Italy and all these countries. So sphere of influence refer to those smaller countries where the big country do not want any other kind of interference by the rival bloc or rival group as such, including Ukraine as such. So that is why Putin considered this war as a watershed movement in relation between Russia and West, because it has completely upended the Russian-Western world relationship, and this is something that many strategic experts argue that Putin had not considered, because he believed that they will launch a blitzkrieg attack over the Ukrainian territory, will capture a large swath of the territory, may be even topple the regime led by Volodymyr Zelensky, will institute some president who is favorable to Russia or whose policy will be favorable to Russia, pro-Russia in nature, and that will be the end of war. So before Western bloc can take any action, Russia would have completed its goal. It is with this vision Russia and Putin has entered the war, but that completely did not happen. In the early days itself, we can see from this particular map, the blue territory as you see is where the Russian forces have entered in the early few days of war. But again, these all regions have been recaptured by the Ukrainian forces, and this entire region, as you can see from the Belarus border all the way to the Russian border and then further to the east as such, these all are recaptured and reclaimed territory by Ukraine as such. So currently talk about it is along the eastern coast of Ukraine, which is considered as a mineral rich belt, industry rich belt, is what has been captured by Russia. That is made up of 4 major territory, that is Luhansk, Donetsk, then you have here Mariupol, Melitopol, Kherson, and then further you have the islands of kind of peninsula of Crimea that has been annexed by Russia in the early assault of 2014 as such. So if you talk about the current situation of this war, this entire red line is what you can consider as a battlefront, and a kind of stalemate like situation has developed where none of the countries are able to make any progress in the either direction as such. Plus last year we have seen Ukrainian forces able to penetrate and enter into the Russian territory, and they have captured a place called as Kursk Oblast in Russia as such. So all these changes have taken place in last 3 years of war as such, and currently war is in the stage of attrition, where both countries are exhausting we can say their artilleries, their weapons, their air defense systems. War also has taken that kind of role where you have large scale uses of drone by both the countries and such. So that is the kind of situation that we can see the war has entered into. Now if you try to understand about the change in tone, because before Putin has clearly stated in early days of war that unless and until Zelensky is toppled and some other president takes charge of Ukraine, they will not have any kind of discussion. Similarly, Ukrainian president also stated that as long as President Putin is in charge of Russia, there is no hope of any dialogue and discussion between both countries. So these seems to be changing. And this change is because of economic decline. Economic decline obviously Russia has faced to a greatest extent because of the loss of the market largely in the form of European Union and the Western world. There has been large scale sanctions. There has been what you can call as freeze of the funds and the freeze of the money that Russia held in the banks outside of Russia. For example, it's believed that about $600 billion of assets and money is frozen and Russia cannot access it. And in few weeks back, even there was support coming from the France and Germany that these funds should be used for the reconstruction of the Ukrainian land, Ukrainian regions which has been devastated with the war as such. So further economic sanctions, President Trump also have stated, even Mark Rubio has clarified that if Russia does not agree for ceasefire any kind of discussion, more stronger sanctions can follow. And that might have propelled Putin to come and have a discussion with the Trump as such. Second, as we have discussed, the war is in that phase where there is no what you can call as a predictable outcome. There is no any possible outcome where countries can win. That is because of stalemate and attrition. And third, because of the Trump's presidency, as long as Joe Biden is president, as I told you, that any question of talks between both powers are almost negligible. So Trump from very early was in favor of resolving the crisis. He is seeing himself as a messiah, as a peacemaker, which he also has claimed in his inaugural speech, and that is why he is trying to make effort in ending Israel-Palestine, Israel-Hamas crisis, Russia-Ukraine crisis. And even if we can talk about in the case of India-Pakistan war, he has again posted portraying himself as a person who has created and helped in establishing ceasefire between both countries. So Trump's presidency has opened up a door of dialogue between the Russia and West, and the manifestation and impact of this we are seeing in the form of the movement toward the resolution. So that is all about this particular video. If you like the video, please hit like button, share with your aspirants, and subscribe to our channel for more such content. Thank you very much.